frugal with your time and start the instructional portion of it after our hellos and hellos. I'm looking at really mainstreamed or Eurocentrically appointed English and its use and its hard work that's happening in the impeachment trial, just the concept of having a trial and having the airing of grievances, sort of, and things that are made equal that may really be filled with inequalities and sort of the loaded language that's carried with those things. So moving forward in class, we'll talk more about the social aspects of things such as emotive language. So word choices that you use to make certain that people know whether you feel positively or negatively inclined towards the subject, or even that you do accidentally. So use the example of your friend that buys clothes from a place that sells clothes that were pre-owned. And so if you think it's a good idea, you'll describe it as if, this person mixes vintage pieces for contemporary looks and saves a lot of money while is doing it. And if you dislike it, then you'll say this person is cheap or miserly or, likes to shop at the Salvation Army or the Goodwill, or uses sort of the branding to highlight that this is a negative thing. So some people do this inadvertently. It's kind of a tale. So you'll say, oh yeah, I think that's really cute for you. And that for you at the end puts an asterisk that lets us know that we don't really think it's cute, but it's cute for you at your level. And so I want us to think about those emotive language pieces that only people with certain schema that have been encultured in a language would pick up on or would be able to get, that seem like regular, normalized, denotative pieces of language, but really carry a connotation or a code with them. And think about what we talked about really in our first class session about the term articulate. So if we are to label someone as articulate, denotatively, we'll say that person is well-spoken and is easily understood, has erudition and enunciation that are combined correctly. But in the connotation of a power dynamic language, articulate is really a code for sort of a breakthrough of a type of character that we have put expectations on to their level of speech. So I'm just trying to find you, and I hope you will find yourself some sociolinguistics in the wild. Okay, so just out there, just looking at the way that people are speaking, I want you to scrutinize it, and I want you to just adopt your professor's persona in being a hater. Now, some haters are born and some haters are made. And as a born hater, I'm going to pick it apart every time I hear anyone speaking, and not you, I love you, we're cousins now, but in thinking of anyone who has a platform and a level of power and a way and a reason to control their language in a multitude of ways. You can choose any word that you want to, and this is the word that you chose. So not off the cuff, not even extemporaneous, but has the ability to structure speech however one would want, and that is the word that you went with, okay, or that is the phraseology that you have chosen. So I'm just inviting you to make sure that you're listening for different types of sociolinguistic elements as you're out in the world. I know that all of you fine people are here tuned in, making certain that you know what to do correctly for your first quiz episode that will happen on this coming Thursday. So I want to give sort of the logistics of the day and the materials first, and then we'll talk about the quiz, of course, and we'll talk about those content pieces. So after logistics, I'll ask if you have any questions about how to take it and all that good stuff, and then we'll move into the content portions that I just want to give you the guns and point to you some things that will be of concern in studying for this first quiz. Alrighty, so firstly, let's talk about Thursday the 11th itself. I'm still going to open up a Zoom at this time, so I also have my 2:30 Zoom open. And those of you who choose to attend, and I really want to tell you, and I'm bragging to everybody that we have an online anytime class, and we still have excellent participation here. So I really appreciate you taking the time, because I know that you don't have to. And thank you also to those students who are watching remotely that are not here in real time, but I can still see are participative in watching the videos. So thank you for taking it seriously in the middle of, this parallelogram that we're in. I appreciate you still, taking time to do this thing. And so I will still open the Zoom, and we have a couple of language games that if you're interested in playing that you can with us. I'm corny, so I'm going to be doing it anyways. If no one else logs on, I'll be playing a game with myself on the Zoom on Thursday at 2:30. But since you have a quiz, you're not, of course, required to be here, and your participation is entirely voluntary, but I'll have some games going at that time. Now, when we are on the quiz date on that 11th, we are going to log in to our Blackboard, and you will be able to click on a link. It will be active and it'll say quiz 1. You have a study guide, and I mentioned that in the chat. Please do check out what was put up this weekend for your quiz 1 study guide, and also a glossary of key terms. And our crash course PowerPoint was labeled to be more in line with that study guide. So you know that's the human communication process crash course PowerPoint, and we'll want to study those for quiz 1. On the quiz 1 study guide, it tells you the exact articles, which you'll notice are all of the articles up to and including the worldview article that are on our schedule of activities. And those will be where you'll receive your more opinion or interpretation schematic questions. And you have an example on our study guide of what a question will look like. So you'll get a question such as, in this article, the author said blank, blank, and blah. How do you feel about blank, blank, and blank? Okay, so you'll get sort of a prompt that will point you to one portion of the article, and then you will have a response that's an interpretation. And make sure I'm telling the truth. Those on camera, nod your head. Anybody who wants to unmute, please do. You all do have access to that study guide, correct? Okay, have you all seen the study guide? Okay, so the study guide is up and it should be active. And you also got, in the study guide, you have an example of what a multiple choice question looks like. And you also have an example of what our short essay response questions will be. 90 minutes is our, starting point for the quiz. And if you have sent a letter of accommodation from our Center for Students with Disabilities, that A is important, is capitalized, then of course that will be honored. Now, if you want to send me a quick message internal in Blackboard or via email that asks for a specific thing, because sometimes we have accommodations and we don't want or need them all. So if you want to say, hey, extend the time, but the questions don't have to be like this, or do the questions like this, but the time is fine. If there's anything special that you want to tell me about how you need your test to appear to you, if you need in large print, for instance, and that's not on your letter, I'm going to do everything that I can see that's on the letter. But if there's anything in particular that you want to poke me and make sure that that thing is the way that is most advantageous to your success, please do send me a message. Otherwise, I'm going to try to go to the exact detail of the letter on what is required. So for all others who have not registered a letter of accommodation, then we will have 5 multiple choice questions, 5 short response essay interpretation questions, and you'll have 90 minutes to complete those in Blackboard. The quiz will be able to be launched from when it becomes midnight on the 11th. So you can take a breath at 11:59 on the 10th and then launch the quiz if you want to. If you want to take it at hot midnight, then please do. And you'll have until 11:59 p.m. to complete that. Now, the only thing is that the way that this portion is set up in Blackboard is it'll still let you launch it even if you don't physically have enough time to complete it, which is kind of wonky. I haven't even figured out how I feel about it yet. For instance, let's say that since you have an hour and a half to take the quiz, that you decide to open it up at 11:30 p.m. It is still calibrated to cut off at 11:59 p.m. So you'll only be able to have a half an hour to take it. Do y'all understand that? So you have 90 minutes as long as you launch it at least 90 minutes before it's supposed to close, because it is indeed not supposed to close 90 minutes after whatever time you start it, but 90 minutes after whatever time you started, and at the latest that has to be 11:59 p.m. So please do give yourself enough time. And of course, you may use any materials that you'd like to answer these questions. So there's not a lockdown browser. If you want to Google something, that's fine. You can do it. But really, honestly, you should be able to accomplish it with what is already posted to Blackboard, which are those articles that hopefully you have read and you have the ability to interpret to your own level of understanding. And the multiple choice questions will be more vocabulary from your crash course PowerPoints, which will cover those important imperatives today, and also from a new document that was placed on Blackboard, which is your key term glossary. So we'll get into that in a bit. Do you have questions or comments, any sort of discussion about the logistics of the test, the date, the time, the accommodations, your ability to launch it, the types of responses, your study guide? Anyone have anything that you need some help with or you want to talk about? Miss Allen, did you have anything?
No, I'm driving. I'm sorry. Did I make a lot of noise?
No, you're good. You're just unmuted, so you're fine. I was just asking. I'm just nosy. It's like my job, I'm totally at work. I just have to ask some questions. So don't mind me. Okay, just be trying to be employee of the month here. All right. So if we don't have any questions about logistics or how to take it or any of those good things, then let's just go on to the content really quickly. So giving you the guns, you don't have to write it down if you don't want to, but at least make yourself some mental notes over where to point in these things. And that will include instruction that is technically new for the key terms glossary. So I'm going to pull out some things, some key terms that I want us to commit to memory to be able to answer prompts that are vocabulary on our first quiz. So firstly, to the things that they're vocabulary or that are by memory that we should be familiar with already. So starting with the crash course PowerPoint. So on our second class period, we went a little bit through the PowerPoint. We posted it to Blackboard so we can start learning just a little bit about the human communication process. So we learned that there is not an official language on the federal level. We understood that we have some numbers of words per minute that the average North American speaker of any type of English, whether it's Eurocentric Standard English or African American English, we're going to utter around 135 words per minute, and our brain has the ability to surveil and to understand around 400 words per minute. And in the gap between someone speaking our language to us and 135 words per minute and our brain's processing in 400, we have our intrapersonal communication, which is our inner narrator or the voice in our head. So we wanted to use that prefix INTRA to remember that that's speech within. And that's really where we host our schema. And we learned on one of our crash course PowerPoint slides that our schema is everything that we already know. So the complete and whole transcript that we have access to of every piece of language that has been given to us, all of our life experiences, everything that we believe is part of reality. And we use that schema to filter all new information that we receive. So let's say that someone's speaking to us and we find out a new fun fact that we'd never heard before. We're likely going to put it up against something that we already have in our schema that's complementary or contains a similar level of detail, and we will sort of translate that new idea into language that we can understand in our own intrapersonal communication and hopefully be able to call that up for another time. For instance, young people, did you know that praying mantises fly? Just never occurred to me. Like, I'm sure they have wings. I just never thought, I just didn't know, but they like totally fly. All right, so that's a fun fact for today. And as soon as I hear praying mantises fly, then I have to look at what a praying mantis looks like in my head, about what color it is, the body shape that I think, any cultural references that go with it, such as, you know, you've heard of kind of the black widow, or that praying mantises actually kill their prey after, you know, doing things. And so all of these thoughts come into the concept of a praying mantis flying. So all of that detail that surrounds someone giving you a new stimulus or a new image that exists in your schema. And so if we are out here with people that have code switching or style switching happening, different dialects, different ways that we use language, different speech communities, then all of our personal schema are going to be different. And we're going to bring sort of that context into all of our translations and communication interaction. So the guns I'm giving you for this part of the crash course PowerPoint is knowing the definition of schema, which is everything that we already know, all of our experiences, and also the quality of our schema to influence the perception of language and of topics that come to us. So we have everything that's already in our brain, and our thought process, which is our intrapersonal communication, takes all of those things into our schema and filters it that way. So we are learning new things, but also putting them up against the experiences that we already have stored. Hey, why? Okay, so what we're doing from that part is memorizing schema, knowing that it's our interpersonal communication, knowing that the United States of America doesn't say you're in America, you must speak English and just this type, but also understand that we do so with kind of like the side eye and the wink. So there's no right way that we're supposed to speak English, correct? But it's just such a coincidence that everyone that is called to be platformed to speak English does it this one certain kind of way, or they're kind of put in a trope. So we know that non-dialectical, non-regional English aspiration is a thing that is considered to be sort of a prestige linguistic community in the United States. And we learned that those variables that go into the performance of English as a prestige language and the dialects therein are controlled by 3 levels of meaning, and also it's more clear to say 3 types of meaning and our 3 levels of communication, that we have a strong segregation of each. So we learned our 3 types of meaning, which were on our crash course PowerPoint, and you're getting the guns: denotative, connotative, and coded. Remember the three types of meaning that we studied: denotative, connotative, and coded. Whereas denotative meaning talks about our dictionary, textbook, or encyclopedia definition, something that's really functional, operational, and just tells us really the life cycle of this concept. We gave the example of the concept of a chair, and it would just say a piece of furniture. Or think about the concept of ignorance. To be ignorant is just to lack knowledge, okay? And that's it, and that's all. And then we have a connotative definition. And when something is connotative, it reveals the emotional aspect. If something is subjective, or we have a positive, negative, or neutral attitude towards this thing. So when someone is called ignorant, we usually don't go right to the technical or clinical definition, which is lack of knowledge, but the connotation that it carries is that this person is supposed to know this thing that they lack in knowledge, and that there is a level of unintelligence, or that this person is dumb for not knowing this thing. So the word ignorance carries with it a negative connotation. And then we have, as our third meaning type, coded meaning, whereas someone can say one word exactly identically and it can mean a whole separate definition, even the opposite. Such as if you look at something and you say, yeah, that one's, that's bad. You're like, that's bad? Yeah, I like it. Huh? Okay, I'm an old, what am I supposed to? So bad actually means good in this sense, or how we have the etymology of a word twist into something totally, absolutely different. But you can also just be one of those words like the one that was aforementioned, articulate, that even though it supposedly carries with it its original denotative meaning that you're saying this person is well spoken, put to this particular person in this particular context, it carries a code that is culturally loaded. So think about other words that are code words, such as collateral. So we'll say this thing is collateral damage, meaning it wasn't part of our initial target, but it is something that, happened in its course. Or we can say that, we're downsizing, which is code for, we're getting rid of these positions, even though the connotation is supposed to be softer than just saying straight out that we're firing people. So we have those three types of meaning that you got the guns for: denotative, connotative, and coded. And the coded version of ignorance could be, I don't know, my frat brothers that are on your campus from that chapter, that's IGNUT, or it could be that we're going to get out of the personal pan pizza and act totally ignorant at my next birthday party, or however it is that you want to think about the concept of ignorance. So we have one word that traverses three types of meaning, and it would be only in the schema of both the communicator and the receiver to negotiate which of those meanings is being held in each context that we have. So please do commit to memory those three types of meaning. Questions or comments, discussion about those at all? Anyone have anything? Okay, and welcome. And let us think about our also three levels of communication, which are at the end of our crash course PowerPoint, where we learn about academic speech, the vernacular speech, and slang. And we even spent a little more time on that midpoint because that's our usual level of speech, or the most casual speech. So we mentioned that academic language is language that's put forth for erudition purposes, to show your vocabulary prowess, your access to the lexicon, and really your access to language inclusively, period. Meaning that you have been taught a certain amount of words, you have been surrounded by materials that contain these words so you can learn them. It is really showing your connection to the opportunity of language itself when you use academic words. And of course you use these in essays and speeches and things that you do for school and presentation and for certain occupations. So you can have academic language that is jargon. Maybe you've heard of academies before, where people try to use all the big flowery $500 words to show off that they're cool and they know these cool words. Also, we use them for precision, however. So it's that not that we want to show off our vocabulary necessarily, but we need exactly to get to this metatarsal for it to make sense to the person who is transcribing, or for us to be seen as a professional. Meaning that we think about academic language as sort of, a gatekeeping function, that in order to be taken seriously, if you're applying for this type of job, you must be versed in this jargon, or you're not going to do well in the interview. That they want to show that you're serious about this. And notice how people interact with academic language, and we didn't cover this, we haven't yet. We will get to nonverbal communication on the other side of our excuse me, on the other side of this quiz, we'll pay more attention to that, especially with a Black kinesics article. But think about how your life changes when you're speaking academically, and now we're erect and we're sitting up straight, and your politician thumb is here, and you're even, your bang is flexed a different way rather than just scratching it out. Or, I mean, there's all sorts of, you adopt sort of this position. Have you ever seen a little kid take a phone and start walking around with it? Okay, and do what I'm supposed to be doing while I'm on the phone. So they start, interacting and moving their heads and do things. And we do this too when we're academic language. We envision we have on a blazer, and we sit up straight and we make a nonverbal matching or a corporal matching to the types of words that we're saying. And we see people who adopt the affect of slang perform similarly. So I have to keep catching myself because I'm so accustomed to making it academic, vernacular, and slang ladder. And I really need to tip that boy over and make sure that we're going academic, vernacular, and slang, as in we have all things equal, not one on top of one another, but also in a continuum. So we have shades between language that is considered to be academic, here for vocabulary prowess, here for occupational jargon, and then slang, the informal language that is youth-driven, culture-driven, and contains a level of in-group speech community status symbols in the phraseology and the language pieces. So vocabulary that's created just for use in speech communities and in groups, things that are designed to be clever and creative that still contain some elements of academic language. So we find that on two ends of these continuum, you still have sort of a mirroring affect, because you're going to use the same conjugation system usually for our our slang, our informal language that will mimic what we do academically. So you'll be able to have a present tense, a past tense. You'll be able to make this thing into a verb or a noun. You'll be able to make it a gerund by extending it this way. We'll have inflection, pronunciation, all those same ticks that are relevant in academic language you can do with slang. But the part of slang will also contain things that are considered pejoratives or expletives, so curse words, bad words, or things that are impolite in front of others. Or you may have things that aren't culturally acceptable politically, so words that you wouldn't say in front of grandma or in front of television because you wouldn't want that thing to come back on you. So there's usually a negotiation or an agreement with slang that's a requirement that is not met with the other levels of speech. So in order to be a fancy pants and speak academic language, you don't usually have to ask anyone's permission or be worried about this thing. But slang, if you start adopting sort of a nonverbal behavior suite to go along with the words that you're saying, or the words that you're saying have a high level of controversy, or a speech community that kind of push back against it, then we want to be careful that we're not offending anyone, or we want to know that, there could be consequence or an outcome difference for the language that we're using. And one of the most soul crushing outcome differences in slang is just that what you're saying is out of date. Okay, so now that you finally adopted this word, the whole world has moved on and we don't call it that thing anymore. How am I going to order my drugs now? Okay, so I don't even know the right word for whatever this thing is. So think about just staying current. The academic language stays a lot longer, meaning it's more steadfast, and the slang is evolving and dynamic and moving much more quickly. But then we have the vernacular, and we'll notice that that midpoint in sort of the sideways sandwich that we're making here, the continuum, the vernacular talks about the casual language of the people, and we spent a little bit of time understanding vernacular as one's mother tongue, meaning that the language that's used in households that are put to children, usually in that critical incident period from 18 months to 5 years old, when we're really trying to develop our use and our understanding of language, and also as a piece that is highly affect and dialect influenced, that talks to us about the way that we produce language for community understanding. So the ways that information enter the vernacular can be either from the slang level or the academic level. So something can be academic and come down, such as the academic presentation of the word female, making it into the vernacular and then into slang to talk about womanhood. Or it can be something that's slang that jumps up to the vernacular, such as saying my bad, and now my bad is written in books and it's on television, news anchors use it all the time. One that I encountered in a textbook just yesterday was the concept of fighting words, which are officially listed in a constitutional amendment. So an amendment, the First Amendment to the Constitution, which talks about speech that is not protected by the First Amendment. And one of those things is relevant to the trial today. It is incitement of violence. And so the concept of fighting words is something that comes from the old school playground. So you can say your face is stupid, your shoes are stupid. Well, your shoes' face is stupid. Well, I think that your stupid sister is stupid. Oh yeah, don't be talking about my sister. Well, she's more stupid than your mama. What? Okay, and so once you say your mama, curtains is it. Now, you know, fisticuffs will ensue. We have to apply hands to the situation. That's the remedy. And that's what we call fighting words. So someone just called you out, they drew a line, and now it's hands. And so that concept of fighting words makes it to the vernacular to where instructors are using it and using the same parable of yelling fire in a movie theater or inciting someone to self-harm by saying this is on fire so you have to jump, or saying those people are going to hurt us so we have to do something about it. And those are all classified as fighting words in the First Amendment. So something that has made it up all the levels to an academic codification. And so these things can move around. Stuff can make it from the vernacular to the academic to the vernacular. It can go through all three. All right, just like we can have all three types of meaning on this one side, we can have our three levels of communication that exist. And know that if African American English to most scholars and to myself as a communication scholar is considered a discrete language, meaning that it is something that is inclusive of, but now separate than Eurocentric standard or mainstream known English, then it carries with it all of those same possibilities. So in African American English, there is a denotative, connotative, and coded meaning in those lexical word choices. And there's also an academic vernacular and slang level. So for that, to us, that means that all African American English is not necessarily vernacular. And we'll get it later in the semester to more formal versions of it. But think about greeting behaviors, think about honorifics. So think about, just to be short with it, think about calling someone auntie that's not your auntie, but that's your auntie, okay? And making sure that person has an honorific, or making sure that you say hello when you walk into a room, and that other cultures may not have that schema, that it is required that the person that walks in speaks. Or think about how, you know, greeting behavior goes, and that gets us into the formal realm, or the academic speech. And then those three levels. So out of our crash course PowerPoint, that completes our instruction there. Our denotative, connotative, and coded meaning, our words per minute versus words per minute being able to be processed, the concepts of our intrapersonal communication, and our schema. Questions or comments about anything we discussed in the crash course PowerPoint? Anyone have anything at all? Okay, and then specifically from our worldview article, and I'm going to give a little commercial I said about something upcoming as well. We want to make sure that we committed to memory those definitions of things that are epistemic and things that are ontological. So we said that epistemology, or things that are epistemic, talk about ways of knowing, so how we obtain knowledge, and ontology talks about reality, okay, or the truth of a community. So we definitely wanted those definitions. So epistemic means of knowledge, and ontological means the production of reality. So controlling those two contexts that we find in the worldview article. And as far as the commercial, we are tentative. I think we're a go, I really do, but I'm going to encourage you. I love that all of you fine people are here now, but on March 2nd as well, anybody who's watching this on the video, and of course, all of the VIPs that are on the call right now, please do try to come to class because the author of that article, Dr. Karanga Carroll, is going to try to be with us via Zoom on March 2nd. Okay, so March 2nd, he's going to try to come and talk to us, and I hope that the date should stay the same. But I'm not putting it in ink yet. Okay, so I'm just putting it on your radar that March 2nd. And if he doesn't come on March 2nd, we'll invite, like, I don't know, like a juggler, or we'll get, you know, some sort of performer. But just try to be here on the 2nd if you get a chance. All right, so it should be straight. It really should be. He'll be here. All righty, so now we want to transition over to a document that we're seeing new to us just over this weekend, which is our glossary of key terms. It's an adaptation from the Public Broadcasting Systems unit that was, what is it to speak American, or how do you talk American? and it was a unit that we used to actually design this course. African American Communication Identities was its predecessor, and then it got rolled into African American Sociolinguistics. And so you'll notice, if you even happen to be on that website, that the same professor who gave us our textbook, who is Dr. John Baugh, who talked to us during the TED Talk as well, is highly quoted in this material and helped with the glossary of terms. I don't even know the brother. I just think he's fantastic, and he's got, like, you know, a good grasp on what we're doing here. So we use lots of his work. I'm going to pull out to you a list of topics, or excuse me, a list of the terms that we want you to memorize for your vocabularic multiple choice elements of our quiz. So I'm going to put the terms themselves in the chat, and then we're going to define them quickly and talk about them and get you out of here. While I'm typing with my two fingers, anyone have any questions or comments whatsoever? Okay, here we go. Oh, I already put accent and affect twice. I'm slipping. Okay. I'm getting old here. All right, sorry. So I meant to put affect and accent together, but I accidentally typed accent twice. So apologies, but let's make sure that we are committing these things to memory in definitional form. So we should know that accent is known as the performance, or like the physicality mechanically, of words and phrases. So the way that we have interpreted these things or heard them, the speakers that are around us that influence our accenture. So just how rounded or crisp the words are. And the term at the bottom, that's a companion affect, also talks about really the drip that we put on it. So let's think of, if we are elongating our O's purposefully, if we are one thing to pop a little bit, okay, excuse me. All right, so if we are wanting to put nonverbals with it, if we want to sound as if we are a robot, today I am giving a speech about this, and we're trying to get rid of our accent. We don't want our twang with our accenture. Then our affect talks about really the package that we put around that accenture. So do we enunciate, and do we make sure that we're promoting that we're Southern and that we're, you know, using sort of the howdy y'all voice, and we want to sound like Sandy from SpongeBob? Or do you want to straighten it out and use crisp R's and hard T's to try to, you know, suppress some of those things and use you all instead of y'all, or you guys, or you guyses? If we're in Boston, are we trying to like make it an Affleck film and we're Bostonian? Are we in The Wire, even though, you know, Leslie Ann can't hear the Baltimore in there, or whatever it is that we're doing? So how are we trying to sound? So think about how affect is gendered as well. So there are plenty of times where someone will try to mimic the voice of what they think is another presenting gender, and will bring their pitch up really high or drop it low through paralinguistic means. So just how we use our voice. If we want to illustrate that someone's being meek about something, for instance, we will say, and then the student asks a question, she's really shy. She's like, am I able to maybe get a preview of it? And that person just got 87 years old and near silent, and also country. Okay, so we just put a lot on it at the same time. So accent talks about the musicality, the rhythm, the cadence, the way that we enunciate our language and performance. And then affect really talks about the whole package that we put on top of it at the same time. Then we learn the term copula, and a copula is a combination between a verb, of course, and its relevance or existence in the syntax and the grammar structure of a sentence. So when we're existing in copula deletion, think about getting rid of the verb to be. All right, so that verb that if we're taking another language, that we got our 500 verbs in a book, and we learn how some of them can be irregular and some of them we produce in certain ways. Think about how it doesn't make sense to delete that copula or to leave the verb to be out of this, that it would change the meaning or it wouldn't make sense. But in African American English, when you take the verb or you delete the copula out of it, we can still achieve the same mutual intelligibility or shared understanding of the language. And your glossary and also some materials in your textbook gives you an example of just saying you right instead of you're right. Okay, so the that would be an apostrophe re to demonstrate the verb are in the verb to be. Instead of saying you are right or you're right, we'll say you right. or we would say, you know, you the boss, you the one, no, you the one, or we will say, you know, where your mama, you know, where Keisha, you know, where is this person? Instead of using the verb to be to say where is Keisha, we would say where Keisha, you know, or where Jessica. It's like she's over there, or you would say over there. So copula deletion means to get rid of that verb to be, and we will notice that it usually is complementary with certain sounds that follow that verb. So when we say you write, it's because that RE is flooding into the R in right. Okay, so we say you right because you're right is a whole lot if that's the way that you accent that language. But if you do speak precisely and you say you are right, and each one of those is cut and crisp, then it makes more sense to us. So we'll notice that the copula deletion is usually companion up with only certain types of musicality and verbiage. And then two, and all of this you have a super gun for, but then two that we definitely want to make sure that we commit to memory. Firstly, apologies, I know I'm running. Questions or comments about accent, affect, or copula deletion, which we just learned about those things and we'll study also in our glossary. Questions or comments? Okay, now we're going to learn a little bit about Creoles and Pidgins, and we want to make sure that we take them in order. So I put Creole first, but let's start with the concept of a Pidgin. So a Pidgin is a contact language, a simplified language that is used between two cultures that have to find what we call a lingua franca, or a way to speak to one another that does not contain elements of, or excuse me, exact proper elements of either one of these languages, but one that we can use as a language of necessity. So it's not always fair, meaning when we're existing within a Pidgin, if there is a dominant culture, if we're in an oppressive paradigm, then it will probably be a limited version of the repressed culture's understanding of that dominant language. So it's not that we're going to take half of the language that you know and half of the language that this culture knows and put them together and make a Pidgin. So sometimes it will be that domineering language will still be ACE. It'll still be the one that everyone has to adjust to, but it means the expectation of the naturalized or dominant speakers of this language will be lowered toward that other person or that other culture's ability to understand it. So a quick and dirty way to think of a Pidgin is that two cultures get together and have to learn how to talk to one another. So they usually use a more simplified version of one or more languages. Okay, so the concept, even your glossary gives you the concept of putting English and French together to form, you know, a sort of hybridization of Creole, or a Gullah language that takes elements of, you know, one language and also English together. So a Pidgin, two cultures get together, create a simplified language that borrows elements from, at the very least, the dominant language, if there is one, and perhaps the other language as well, to get along and to talk to one another. When that Pidgin starts being taught to residents and participants as a vernacular, meaning as a native language, as a mother tongue, then that Pidgin has now converted to a Creole. Okay, and so that's that definition. So a Creole is when a Pidgin is learned as a first language. So if we have a contact culture and these cultures have been together on the same island for this whole time, and now it's just always an island in my head, it could be like, you know, Ohio. But if we are in the same place for this amount of time, then there are going to be babies born, and we're going to have to teach them how to talk, and you have to have them talk to both parts of society and all of these people that have lived here too. So that's going to form a Creole. So the important part for you, and here are the guns, is that the Pidgin comes first, and the Pidgin can roll into a Creole, meaning that once the Pidgin has a codification, is established as a true linguistic community, then there will be people that are born into and cultured into this thing as a vernacular or a native language. And so that is our definition of a Creole. Questions, comments, or conversations about Pidgins and Creoles? Anybody have anything at all?
Yes.
Yes.
So, in reference to the study guide, there was one question with pigeon being referenced. So, you just explained the answer.
I sure did. I'm sorry. I have certainly done so. Yes. I did. Okay. And DJ made sure to highlight it for everybody else. So that might be a freebie. Okay. It might. So yes, I surely did. So now we know the difference between a Pidgin and a Creole. And we know which one is which. Good question and good answer, I think. Questions or comments? Who else got something? Okay, lastly from our glossary, we just learned about the habitual be, and that's also the one, DJ's pretty much just teaching class here. It's also the one that he pulled out for us to explain. So when we are showing a repeated or ongoing state in African American English, at times we will use a habitual be to show not the immediacy or urgency of a current situation, but of something that is ongoing. So let's say that you're looking for the boogity boo Dan man, okay? And we're in front of the club and you say, yeah, he be out there Saturday. So if you say he be out there, it doesn't mean that he is going to be out there on this Saturday necessarily, but that he is usually out there on Saturday. Okay, so he be there Saturday, or they be out there. Are the cops really hot in Bel Air? Yeah, they be out on the street like all the time. Okay, they're out there, 6, 7 of them. They be deep. All right, so you know that there's a bunch of them. So it may sound weird to hear an academic say it on your Zoom, but it's a thing that we talk about all the time, and it's in the vernacular, experience of African American English that is mutually intelligible to all 3 levels as well. So even if you would not prefer to hear that term, it's something that your average person that is, or let's use the word typical person that was encultured in African American English would be able to understand what is being said. All right, questions or comments about anything that we've learned towards our study guide? Anybody have anything at all that y'all want to talk about on the study guide, the glossary? And again, I've encouraged you, I've wagged a finger and I'm doing it again. Please, please, if you have not gotten access to our 2 textbooks, please do so, because we're officially in our Linguistics Pursuit of Justice book as of this coming Tuesday. And remember, on Thursday, we're going to just do some language activities. So you're welcome to be with us if you prefer, but you're not required. You just are required to take your quiz. Please do ask your question. You're welcome to unmute yourself if you like. Who's this? We got it, Maya? Is that your
Yes.
name? Am I
No,
pronouncing
it's pronounced Imea.
Yeah, apologies. Okay,
No,
I
it's okay.
all about it.
So for pidgin language, would patois be an example of pidgin language? It's like a combination of a whole bunch of like influences, like French, sometimes Spanish, sometimes it's a lot. Each island has their own patois. Is that an example of pidgin?
I think it would be an example of a pidgin, and I would also argue that it would roll into a Creole, because there are absolutely children that are coming up learning that, that must learn patois for social survival. So I would say that it began as a pidgin, and all the different combinations are their own individualized pidgins and are Creoles too in those communities.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, others for now. Other questions or comments?
Yes. As you just spoke about the difference between academics and vernacular,
Mm-hmm.
do you make a conscious decision to use either or in an academic setting?
I believe so. I mean, on a personal level, and it's personal for everyone. So it's not, because some people can really, like you've heard somebody say before, it just slipped out. And when something, a different word or a phrase just slips out, it already has to be a part of your schema in order to have the ability to slip. So you have to have it there. So sometimes you can voluntarily deploy it. Sometimes it can be an excited utterance. So on my personal level, I consider it to be a style switch, because it's all the same code for me, that it's my version of African American English, and I will switch in style between academic, vernacular, and coded language. But if we're switching like from English to Spanish, then that's an official code switch, or English to Tagalog. But plenty of times I just decide to do it, and then sometimes it seems like it's more involuntary. It's usually when I'm cussing people out in traffic that I don't realize that it's happening. And it's like, wait, I'm supposed to be on the vernacular because I got kids in the back seat, but you just cut me off. We almost died. So sometimes it feels involuntary. What do y'all say? What do you think? Like, do y'all feel like it's involuntary, or can you control it? I mean, you can definitely control it. We know you can do it proactively. You can decide to do it. But does anyone ever feel like you move through the levels accidentally?
Not really.
Not really.
Yeah, I know I make a conscious decision whenever I'm in public around other people involved in academics, such as yourself, to speak
I'm telling you, nobody checked my Vita. I could be the you don't know. Do you know what's going on over here? I'm like, cause what? Cause I own a book. So do you, DJ. You're an academic too. Now we're all academics. We're associated with school, and I want us to think about the concept. And I think it's a really good question to ask oneself if it can slip out or if you can accidentally fall into a difference. Sometimes for me, I don't feel like there is a word or there is a piece of academic language which will fulfill the sentiment that I'm trying to express. So I'll have to go to another level and then give some context for it. So I can't give you that feeling. Okay, so I was trying to think of it yesterday, and this is gonna sound really crazy, but has it ever happened to you that you thought you had a little more of your drink left and then you reach for your glass and you don't? Like, I was done. And so now I either have to get up or I just plain don't have any left, and that's horrible. Like, what's the word for that? And then think about the opposite. So what if you thought your drink was done and then you find out that magically the angels have blessed you with 1 more inch of this thing and you're like, oh, this is fantastic and great. What word do you use for that? So you might have to pull it from somewhere else. So can you say, oh yeah, I was very pleased at the amount of drink that I had left, or I was, I was upset highly or whatever. And all you can say is you're like, man. And that's all that I could think of. It's like, I got more drink, man. All you can think is the word man, and that makes no sense and contains no inherent meaning. It's just a feeling or a connotation for something. So think about having to reach from some of the levels to make connections contextually. All right, other questions or comments? Anybody have anything?
It made me think a bit of my workplace, because most of us are familiar with each other and speak more in the vernacular, even in emails and stuff with the higher ups. That's just kind of the environment. But one of my former coworkers was very formal, and she was the only one. So the rest of us in emails where she was attached, we didn't really know how we should be speaking or how we should be doing that. And so it was like this weird mix of academic and vernacular. And then if the email chain went on long enough, it would usually just switch to straight vernacular. But it was always a really weird combination.
Now, did this coworker push back? Like, if you would address her in the vernacular, would she return extra academic? Because I've seen that happen sometimes too, where a person will make certain that this is the level that I want you to communicate with me in.
Oh, no, we were on the same level, like within the kind of workforce, I guess. So I think that was just her own way of speaking, and due to her experiences, it was maybe like, I'm talking to my coworkers, so I should be polite, while the rest of us were like, it's just my coworkers,
Got it. No, I wasn't, apologies. I wasn't asking if she was like trying to sun you, like she was trying to tell you have to talk to me because I'm the boss or any of those things. But I mean, would she, when you would write an email in the vernacular, would she make sure to respond in what it felt like kind of a hyper academic language? Like, to give an example, sometimes a professor will get an email that will say, okay, thanks, Autumn. And I'll be like, I'll answer the question, and I'll be like, thank you, Professor Rayner, comma, credentials, plus, blah, 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 author of, to make sure, like, I don't know what time you thought it was, but it's not this, okay, this isn't it. So I was saying, would she push back against it, or would she ever kind of go along with it, or just ignore that you're on 2 different levels?
I think she kind of went along with it.
Got it. So she went along with it. Okay, maybe you loosened her up a little bit, try to poke her.
Yeah.
You have to tell people that. You'd be like, hey, it's casual Friday. We're wearing jeans in this conversation. We're not wearing suits. All right, others for now. Other questions or comments? Anything y'all need to talk about? All righty. Well, you got the business. Okay.